the session, you'll have the opportunity to answer some questions, to place any questions that you may have or any comments. We ask, though, by doing so, that you put that in the chat option on the webinar toolbox, on the toolbar, so I can address those more readily. So please put any responses to questions, any additional comments in that chat option. At the end of today's session, I will also present my email address as well. So if you prefer to communicate outside of the webinar, certainly we can do that as well. In today's webinar, we'll be exploring the 4 working age generations and describing each generation and the generational differences each have, along with the implications that you, as their manager, as their executive director, supervisor, are experiencing by working with all generations. This is the first time in American history that we've had all 4 different generations working side by side. And as you know, there are challenges that are represented by these differences. And that was one of the questions that we asked when you registered for today's webinar was, what challenges do you face as a result of the generational diversity within your team? First and foremost, I want to thank those of you that had responded. We had some really good response, and we'll definitely address those throughout today's presentation. Certainly, if you think of something in addition to what you had presented before, please do so again in that chat option. As with any training, especially when we're talking about different communication styles, leadership styles, management styles, we often say, let's take a step back and let's self-assess and self-manage ourselves first. So throughout today's session, I challenge you as we're going through and identifying those different preferences, characteristics, values, appreciations, all that each are presented in each different generation. Look and identify those that you can relate to and those that are at an extreme as in this generational timeline. So identify yourself within this timeline based on what year you were born, and maybe you already know what generation you belong to. But certainly, again, as we're going through today, to really understand and self-assess ourselves first, which will help to build these relationships with the other generations that are working together. On this screen, we see generations from the greatest, what we call really the silent, the traditional, the veterans, all the way to the Gen Ys. And for the purposes of today's webinar, we're really going to focus on these 4 main generations of the American workers: the silent, the boomers, the Gen X's, and the Gen Ys. Let's start first with the traditional, the silent. And this is the oldest generation, although most now are retired. This generation includes individuals, and sources would say are born before 1945. Members of this generation were influenced by the Great Depression and World War II, along with other events that may be described as conservative. The people in this generation like formality, they like a top-down chain of command, and they need to be respected. Typically, they make decisions on what has worked in the past or what their past previous examples provided them. Individuals in this generation are characterized by being private, they're silent, they respect authority, they love and value your things. For those of you that have ever watched a program on TLC or maybe another a network called Hoarders, you'll find that most individuals that are represented on this show are of this generation because they are so they want to keep their belongings close to them, their values close to them, because they saw such hardship that they want to make sure that they can keep their belongings close to them. So those of the silent or traditional, authoritative, respectful are definitely some of those characteristics. Next, the baby boomers. This is the generation that certainly makes up for a large part of the population. And these are generations that of people that identified as between 1943 and 1965. They are considered the baby boom generation because they make up the extra 17 million babies that were born during this time. It had the largest impact on society due to their size. They make up 78 million people. They definitely had to witness political and social turmoil. They were much more involved in change, if you will, through protests and not necessarily through the formative years of the silent or traditional years. Boomers have been characterized as people who believe hard work and sacrifice are the price to pay for success. They really started the workaholic theme, trend, word. They believe in paying their dues to get what they want. They see step-by-step promotions. They're team players, they're collaborative, they're confident. They are beginning to accept diversity more so than the generation before, but are still pretty liberal in their beliefs, and they value personal gratification. Baby boomers. Moving on to the generational X's. They were born, sources saying ranging between 1968 and 1979, but can go as high as 1982. They are known as the baby bust generation because it's such smaller size compared to the generation that preceded it. These are individuals that are typically children of the older baby boomers who grew up in very financial insecurity. They saw job markets that were stagnant. They saw job markets, corporations that were downsizing. They had to experience both of their mother and fathers working because of the job markets. Therefore, you may have also heard them being called latchkey kids. They're the ones that were definitely in the before and after school programs. They were being not necessarily raised, but looked after by those outside sources outside of the home. Because of this and because of the work ethic that was brought on by the mother and father, this generation definitely saw and experienced a higher divorce rate among any of the other generations. They were influenced by MTV. They had to experience the AIDS epidemic. And really, this is when worldwide and sports figures competition really became popular within this generation. They definitely aspire to achieve. However, unlike the baby boomers, they definitely have more of an appreciation for that work-life balance. They saw what it did to their parents, what it did to their family, and understand that the life balance is just as important as the work. They value continuous learning and technical skills, and they work by accomplishment, not by the clock. My job is done. I've completed that task. It may be 3:45. It may be 4:15, but working by that accomplishment. Finally, the Gen Ys. This is a generation that we're just starting to come and learn more about. With the age group of 1978 to 2002, sources have identified. There's lots of labels that surround this generation, and certainly some of that they brought on themselves, but you know, the whole millennial, the Gen Ys, certainly tossed around a lot of descriptions, if you will, for this group. This group was really shaped by their parental success. They again are very comfortable with the technical side. They share a lot of the same beliefs, if you will, characteristics of those of their Gen X counterparts. They embrace change and actually probably prefer it, gives them more flexibility to be creative. They're multitaskers, and we find that the individuals in this generation are those that are most highly educated or have the highest standards of education. They can be characterized as demanding and less process-focused. So again, this timeline here gives a description of kind of as you start to think about not only yourself, but where your team, where you can kind of place them. Maybe you already had an idea. Certainly a beginning to those characteristics of each one of those social styles and kind of, each one of those styles and why they are, what influenced that. Next, we have a chart that really dives deep into some of those challenges that you all indicated on what you're seeing as part of diversity in the workplace. It talks about these certain workplace characteristics on the left-hand side there, and then identifying those among each one of those 4 generations. Work ethic and values. Again, we talked about the veterans, the silence. They're very hard workers. They respect authority. They've had to sacrifice a lot. Definitely duty before fun and adhere towards rules. Myself, that would happen to be in a lower generation, definitely has an appreciation for that, but certainly maybe not necessarily an understanding, especially when you get to those Gen Y generations where they're definitely more fun-based, if you will. Definitely play hard over work hard. And my grandpa we always had to have the chores done, any task that was given before we even thought about putting on our play clothes and enjoying the evening. Baby boomers. Saw a lot of this, again, workaholics. Definitely, again, we talked about that there really wasn't a work-home life balance. It was definitely all about work. They liked personal fulfillment, anywhere that they can present themselves where they get kind of that, where they see them being valued. Starting to, unlike veterans, they're starting to question that authority. Generation X. Just eliminate the task. Just want to get the job done. Again, they're not clock watchers. Just accomplish what they have to do that day. They want structure and direction, and they're a little bit more skeptical on the whole work ethic and values. Ys. Again, constantly moving. These are the ones you can't sit still, and employers have the most difficulty with, especially when trying to retain, motivate, find ambition for them, because they're always moving on, looking for the next best thing. Multitasking, looking for the next best thing, not only when you're challenging them to complete a task, but hey, ABC company over here will offer me a more flexible schedule. I can wear shorts in the summertime and a polo shirt versus knee-highs and a dress. Very goal-oriented. Moving on to work is, it's definitely an obligation. It was an obligation for the veterans, for the silents. Baby boomers saw it more as an exciting adventure. Again, they are definitely ones that they'll do the blood, sweat, and tears to get the ending prize, and are willing and able to do that. Generation X, again, remember we're starting to kind of challenge that, and they're challenging what work really is, and is it a contract? It's something I have to do. And again, Ys, moving on. It's a means to an end. It's fulfilling the need, the desire that I have at this moment, but again, we'll look to another place that can meet that end and provide me better wages, a more flexible schedule, whatever that may be. Leadership style, again, goes along with kind of the age time that we grew up as, directive, command and control. Whereas Gen Xers, everyone's the same. They start to challenge others, and they start to ask why, those questions. Some things that definitely were present in the responses that you had for challenging was communication styles. It was really how does my team communicate effectively? So really interactive style and communication. Certainly you can see by the veterans in both of those areas, they're very formal, individual. Baby boomers were definitely in person. They're the ones that love to have meetings, They're your campfire leader that you're all singing Kumbaya. They want everybody to be involved and to be team players. It's collaborative. Generation X, again, they're starting to ask why, so they need more direct. Why am I doing this? And immediate communication. And then Gen Y, let me participate. But let me participate in the way that maybe it doesn't call for 15 meetings during the day, or maybe it doesn't mean that I have to have a 10-page formal memo on what I'm supposed to do. Let me do it through email and voicemail. Use what I'm good at, which is that technology experience. Feedback and rewards. Let me be to myself, individual, so no news is good news. And definitely, since they're task-driven, satisfaction is that job well done. It's completing whatever needed to be done. That's all I need. That's all I care about. Baby boomers really don't appreciate feedback. They would rather have the title or the money in return. You'll see and hear a lot of that from the baby boomers. I just happened to have a conversation with my mother, who is in baby boomer generation, that definitely voiced her depreciation for the fact that her Gen Y coworkers she feels like they don't work as much and they get paid for it anyway. So she says, you know what, I'm just going to be more like you guys, and I'm not going to work as hard and still get paid the same amount of money. So definitely a different appreciation there when it comes to feedback and rewards. Gen X's, freedom is the best reward. So allowing me to be creative, to challenge, again, that work or that contract. Gen Y's, whenever I want it, at the push of the button, I want to be involved in meaningful work. Motivation, that was another challenge that a lot of you all had represented. How do I make, especially those of Gen Y, how do I make them motivated? How do I make them ambitious? For veterans, again, they play off their experience, and they like to do things, complete tasks that they know have worked well. So certainly anytime you can bring out their experience, it's definitely respected. Again, talked about baby boomers. They don't appreciate the feedback, but they want to know that they're valued and needed. Certainly, definitely when it comes between a Gen Xer and a Y. Let me know that I've worked, I've put in my 60 hours this week, and let me know that I'm valued and needed. Gen X's, do it your way and forget the rules. Again, they're starting to challenge this whole structure and becoming more of their own. And Gen Y's, yeah, I'll work with you if you're creative and bright like I am. Certainly, again, picking and choosing who they wish to work for and work with. We talked about that work and family life never interferes, work never interferes, home life never interferes with work when it comes to veterans. There was no balance, again, that we talked about with that boomers, and now it's finally starting to become more of a balance. And typically people are looking for that and expecting for that of you as the employers. Never would have dreamt about having to take work off early to be at a sports event for a child or share a special occasion. And now it's definitely in the eyes of the employee and certainly expected in that manner. As you see this, and talking about the question that we asked when you registered, challenges that you face with diversity in the workplace, some of the things that, again, that you pointed out were finding a way for people to communicate. Dress code, how do you handle dress code, especially when you're talking, when you have both traditionalists or veterans and Gen Yers, where veterans definitely, if a man isn't wearing a tie, that means to them they lacked respect. I know when I started work 13 years ago, it was made for women to wear pantyhose in the summer, to no sleeveless tops, no open-toe sandals, and now Gen Ys are coming in and definitely changing that to a more comfortable, if you will, less professional dress code. We talked about lack of ambition or motivation from the teens and the 20s. And then, again, differing values and work ethic. I just addressed very minimal of those responses, but thought that these were probably the biggest challenges that are presented in the workplace. From the information that we just talked about in the chart, what are some things that you could do in knowing what those preferences are to help eliminate some of these communication barriers, if you will? Dress code. What are things you could do to motivate those teens and 20s? Feel free, if you will, now to name some of those things in that chat box option, and we'll discuss some of those responses. Think of this example. A top-notch cross-functional team with individuals from several different generations has been set up to recommend a solution to a nasty manufacturing problems. I'm sure none of your communities and none of your workplaces ever deal with problems. But after a couple of weeks, the manager responsible for the team can't understand why there is constant bickering and nothing is getting done. Have you ever experienced that? So what do we do from here? Now understanding just one of those characteristics of each of those individuals relating to the communication needs, he or you may understand why the stalemate. For example, the veterans on the team are looking for handwritten notes, again, talking about ways to communicate and direct specific requests for work to be done. What do you need from me? The boomers, they don't want to work independently. They want to work as a team, and they expect to have meetings at any time, any place, and it's fine if they're called on day or night. The Xers, they don't want to hear about the project outside of work. I'm outside of work, and don't care, and don't you dare call them at home. And the Yers don't want any meetings at all. They only want communication via voice, email, and voicemail and email. So how, knowing what we discovered in the previous slide, how do we handle these differences? Shared activities, certainly. Shared activities that brings out the creative side of those Gen Yers, but activities that also have a direct timeline, direct response for those Gen Xers are definitely to the point and directive for those veterans. Baby boomers, if we're getting everybody involved, of course they're satisfied. Any other responses? Dress code, again, I think certainly dress code is beginning to play a much bigger part in the workplace. And certainly, as any HR professional will tell you, number one obviously needs to be formalized within a handbook. But through that, any way that you can make it available and accessible to all generations, allowing them to be as flexible as they choose. So writing it in a way that it gives open format to wear open-toe shoes, but to give the veterans the option that if they want to wear the tie, they can wear the tie. But again, addressing to all the generations there. Lack of ambition in teens. We know that they are very fast-paced, and so bringing the challenges to them. Certainly, if you're just dealing with a problem that maybe a different process needs to be involved, giving that to a baby boomer or a veteran may not get you the result that you were anticipating. So building that creativity from those X's and Y's, building on that characteristic. Along with those workplace characteristics, we also talk about preferred leadership attributes, and that's you, and that's what these different generations are looking towards when they look for leadership attributes. And certainly the silent or the traditionalists are looking for somebody that's credible, and you'll see from this slide that that extends all the way through the Gen Yers, and then credibility falls off. So Gen Yers are definitely place more of an emphasis on listening well. You'll notice the Gen Ys said dependability and dedicated. Those weren't even part of the silent, the boomers, or the Gen X's. They all three shared like leadership attributes except for the Gen Y. So we're definitely seeing a switch in what they preferred from their leaders. They want somebody that they can depend on and that's dedicated to them. We talk about also 4 important aspects of workplace culture: fairness, to be ethical, professional, friendly, and social. I ask you, of those 4 generations, which generation do you think fairness was the most important to? Will you please place your answer in that chat option? Ethical. Which generation played the most percentage of, had the highest percentage of thinking that being ethical was the most important? Professional. And then finally, friendly and social. Boomers. Somebody said boomers for fair. Actually, I'm sorry. For fairness, they were all very in line with each other, 90, 86%, 87%, except for our Gen Yers. Again, going back to that previous slide where credibility, trustworthiness, listening was more important. Dependability. Colleen says Gen Ys. For ethical, Gen Ys had the less percentage. Silent, 90%, boomers, 84%, Gen Xers, 83%. I'm sorry, 66%. Professionalism. What do we think about professionalism? Gen Ys, definitely, Colleen. Gen Ys definitely had the less percentage of those that felt like it was an important aspect. Only 48% of them thought that being professional at the workplace was important. Silent, definitely. They're more rigid, obviously, more rule-oriented. Boomers are right there with them. Gen Xers starting to get out of that a little bit, and then definitely the Gen Ys. Finally, friendly and social. Interesting enough, the silent and the boomers didn't even respond to as friendly and social as being important. So you can definitely see yes, Gen Y is definitely for fun, 59%, and 66 actually a little bit before that. So introducing that whole balance between work and home life and that fun, and how do we create a more fun environment. Above all, though, each one of these definitely valued, if you will, these 4 different aspects and placed more of a higher percentage for all of these. But throughout all that, the top reasons for happiness at work, everyone agreed that they want to feel valued. And certainly if you've seen any sort of other types of polls, if you will, of reasons why people leave. You know, a lot of times people would always say money or challenge or promotion. Certainly, we're seeing that being valued is one of those tops. So they all share that. So it's how, as we as leaders, now that we know how they want it to be communicated, they each have a certain way in that. We know what they place as far as being important aspect of work. How through that do we continue to make them, each one of them, feel valued? Because we know especially that our Gen Ys are very fast moving, and percentage that would like to stay for the employer for the rest of their life, this says it all. Silent, very dedicated, 70%. Boomers, 65% would. Gen Xers, 40, and Gen Ys definitely playing a roulette with Gen Ys is whether or not they're going to stay. Definitely being able to have more of a creative, fun, less rigid environment is going to keep those Gen Ys. But as you know, and as we talked about, those silent ones, silent generations, those are the ones that are really retiring. So who are we playing to when it comes to workplace? We definitely know that our Gen X's and our Ys certainly are making up a majority of that workplace. You identify challenges in each workplace, whether it's in the senior living community, whether you're a pharmacy, a hospital, whatever that may be, you all have implications. And knowing and understanding, again, that each group is diverse, and we're not all the same with any generation. And we talk about that with social styles and with leadership styles and management styles as well. It's not all the same, so you can't manage to the same. Oftentimes, conflict appears from perception rather than from value differences. They're perceived to be a certain way. So certainly making sure that we're not having assumptions. Effective communication obviously is the key, and we'll keep preaching that, but understanding what people prefer on how to communicate is definitely going to help eliminate some of that struggle there. And then being aware of different work and communication styles. Again, not only are you dealing with generational styles, but you're also dealing with communication styles as well. Certainly, somebody can be more vocal, somebody can be more rigid, somebody can share more of their opinions, loudly, boastfully. Certainly you're dealing with communication styles as well as generational styles, and making sure that you're not dealing with those perceptions and you're dealing more with those facts. Takeaways from today's training. As we mentioned at the beginning, some of your challenges, and please feel free to refer back to that graph that shows those workplace characteristics of each of those generations. I know it will help you through your communications and through what you know and can appreciate each generation thinks of work ethic and values. Any other follow-up questions, concerns, comments that you have for today? Interesting. I definitely had a takeaway that interesting to see shared activities can motivate and unite staff, certainly. Gave examples of how that affects the boomers, how that affects the veterans, and what each one of those generations need in order to motivate during those activities. Our time has come to an end, but I want to thank you and appreciate your attendance today. Please feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to answer any of the questions that you have regarding any of the information, or if you would like more information on generational differences in the workplace, feel free to use my email there. Appreciate your attendance and have a great rest of your day.